I think that the United States is retreating. And if Trump is going to retreat and save face, the best way to do it is to show the United States is strong. So Greenland, Panama, Canada, all of these make sense. All of these are colonies of the United States in a sense, but he's strengthening the hand of the United States on the one hand, but also he's making any potential retreat from Ukraine look unimportant because people are looking at the shiny object in Greenland, they're looking at the shiny object in Canada.
It looks very much to the outside as if Netanyahu has carefully put Trump in the corner. But I think there are many in Israel, because they've been looking at the comments that are coming out that see it very differently. They know that, the right in Israel are sort of laughing at this, and they say, doesn't Netanyahu, who's beaming all over his face after this, doesn't he realize that Trump hates him and despises him and knows how to play him?
Hello, everyone. This is the New Rules Podcast, and I'm your host, Dimitri Symes Jr. Today, we're coming to you with another Middle East update, but this time it's going to be special. With me today is a dynamic duo and longtime friends of the program, Tehran University professor Saeed Mohammed Marandi and former British diplomat Alistair Crook. Gentlemen, it's so great to have you in studio instead of looking at you via Zoom screen.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And for helping make this interview happen, I want to thank, first of all, the Valdai Club, who flew these wonderful gentlemen out to Moscow. And I also want to thank our good friend Pepe Escobar, who helped facilitate everything, who was really involved at every step of the way. And you can't see him, but he's sitting behind the scenes, smiling and, causing a positive aura to emanate in the studio. And if you are first-time listeners, first-time viewers, please make sure to follow us on X and on Rumble for more detailed geopolitical analysis. Now that these formalities are out of the way, let's get to the top news dominating the headlines. And we really didn't have to look far because Donald Trump once again gave us something to talk about. Because during his most recent press conference with Netanyahu, he declared that the United States planned on owning Gaza and turning it into, quote unquote, the Riviera of the Middle East. And as part of this elaborate strategy, he said that he wanted to basically deport all of the Gazans to Egypt, Jordan, and elsewhere. And so I want to get both of your reaction to this, but I want to start with you, Professor Marandi. What on earth is going on here?
Well, we're discussing this on the way here, and I was telling Pepe there are maybe two scenarios. One is that I think Trump may actually be saying this in order to gain concessions from Netanyahu, to ease the pressure from himself. Because it's not going to happen. No one is going to empty Gaza. The Gazans tolerated almost 16 months of genocide and resisted so that they wouldn't be expelled from their land, so that they would survive on Palestinian land. So that is definitely not going to happen. But by saying this, maybe, and Alistair knows these things better than I, maybe he's strengthening Netanyahu's hand, and that makes Netanyahu more indebted to him. And so and also Netanyahu, therefore, cannot make demands on him either on other issues because he's given him the ultimate concession. But I don't see it happening. Another way of looking at it is that it's just Donald Trump, and that he's, as they say, just saying these things. But I do think that there's something behind it. One thing, though, that I think is significant, and Trump is probably not taking into consideration, is that by making these statements, he is weakening those regimes that are loyal to the United States. When he's saying that they're on our they agree, everyone's issuing statements, the Turks, the Saudis, the Egyptians, everyone is saying, no, we don't accept the Palestinians being expelled from the land. But even if that's true, many people in these countries are going to have questions about whether there are secret dealings behind closed doors, and I think that weakens these regimes.
Alistair, would you agree that this is a negotiating bluff by Trump, that he doesn't really intend to have the United States go in, occupy, rebuild Gaza, and deport its residents?
I think you have to understand the context better about what Trump is doing and to be able to interpret him, because throughout this period, he says different things. And so one moment he's saying, in the context of Russia, oh, it's in ruins, its economy is in ruins, it's deteriorating badly, and they better do a deal while I can, otherwise I'm going to sanction them up to the eyebrows. And then the other time says, well, I understand their security concerns, and Putin is a friend of mine, and I like him, and we'll do a deal. So, I mean, what's going on? And I think you have to understand the situation that he has dealing with, because first of all, during this last period with Obama, they introduced this system which they call the whole of society structure of consensus. It was started off much earlier, but when it came to it, and it started off with the terrorist concern, what it was having a singularity of messaging, and it was done as a machine. This is not a philosophical project. It is a machine. They have a message, a meme that they produce. They allow the meme to sort of swell in a well for a while. And then they had a whole team of people with smartphones and laptops, and they started off spreading it and giving it a push. And the answer was with digital technology, essentially mass plus velocity equals momentum. So they had masses of people to give it momentum, velocity and momentum, and speed it through the thing. And then it was much bigger than that, because they brought in the FBI to magnify it, to say, that what was being said or disinformation was now illegal, was a terrorist threat. They brought in the justice. Every university had a disinformation department funded by the government, which would immediately pick up on these memes that were produced by Obama largely and then spread in order to give sort of consensus to people. And it was a very clever tactic. Instead of sort of saying, oh, you want to do this, to take this view because you look cool. No, they said, this is what you'd like to be seen by other people. If you don't take the vaccine, then you'll be seen to be endangering other people. You don't want to do that. But this produced a wave on, social media, a huge momentum, as I say, velocity and mass gave it momentum. And this thing then came, and then everybody was following and picking up on these memes, and it was producing something that was changing the whole political climate in the United States mechanically. It was not, as I say,
a fake consensus.
It was a fake consensus that was being produced by this thing. But why am I emphasizing? Why I'm emphasizing that it was a mechanical operation is that the first thing that Trump is doing is throwing the grenades into this process to destroy it. I mean, the main thing was, of course, when Elon Musk took control of Twitter. And suddenly now the whole thing has been inverted, and sort of Elon Musk is giving a new, if you like, permission structure to Americans, saying, no, you have the right to say what you think. You have the right to be a man or a woman. This is the converse being struck. But he's breaking up, if you like, the actual mechanism. The FBI, the Justice Department. So what's happening, when he speaks and he says things that people say, but it doesn't make any sense, he's stupid, he's talking nonsense and things like this. Bits of things are going to one constituency. Another part is going to another constituency. But his main thing is the enemy within, the battle within. And he's fighting this battle against what was a huge meme factory, describing everything as disinformation and Trump as crazy and erratic. And he's having to do this. But the key thing is that his real interests are not in the Middle East, are not in Ukraine. His main interests are the economy, getting rid of the deep state, and actually producing jobs back in America. And the most important thing is to stop the excess expenditure, the fiscal profligacy by the US federal government, which is leading America almost to bankruptcy, because they have to refinance 9.8 trillion of debt this year. They are in a real problem. And so the key thing for him is to get his main players through confirmation hearings. Tulsi Gabbard, Hegseth has got through, but Cash in the FBI, and so on. And he has to do a deal. So sometimes he's saying things that appeal to the deep state, because they are players in this. So people who often complained and said, all these Israeli firsters, what are they doing in it? Well, they're lightweights. They've been put in there. But that's the entry price to this deal. He has to win this deal first before he can concentrate on the Middle East or on Ukraine. He has to get his key people through confirmation. And it's tough. You saw with the defense secretary, it was by one vote that they got through. Vice President Vance voted in favor. So it's not clear. It's not a foregone conclusion that they will. And he's very keen to get Gabbard through this process. So sometimes he says things that'll appeal, to the hawks. We need to bomb Iran, or I'm going to be tough in Iran. I'm going to sanction Russia or something like this. It's not
empty Gaza.
It's not meant to be read literally, not meant to be understood literally. He is saying one thing, then the next day may say another, and he hopes this will produce movement. It'll create some sort of movement that then he can maneuver within. That's what's the background.
I hear both of you, and I remember back in 2016, Ann Coulter's famous saying that you should take Trump seriously, but not literally. But for the sake of counter-argument, I can see a case why Trump could be serious about what he's saying in Gaza, because one thing that I've noticed is that there seems to be a certain paradox with Trump. Because on the one hand, he says that America right now is very weak, that it's been decimated by decades of corrupt and ineffective leadership. But on the other hand, he's talking about annexing Greenland, Canada. He seems to be consumed by a sort of imperial euphoria and the belief that he can take on the world and win. And so when I look at sort of his rhetoric on Gaza, it does seem overall similar to what he said about Panama Canal, about Greenland, what he's previously said when he's fantasized about luxury resorts off the coast of North Korea. But I also remember the fact that when you look at the people surrounding him, he has a lot of hardcore Zionists in his cabinet. You mentioned...
That's the entry price.
Yeah, Peter...
He wouldn't be able to have this discussion with the deep state. The deep states are going to say, some parts of foreign policy, the deep structures of policy, you're not going to touch those, but we will let you have Kash Patel for the FBI. This is the deal. Until that deal is done, his hands are partly tied. But I think you've got that wrong, because I see it as... what is happening is an inside-out strategy that is taking place in the sense that, America always wants to grow. It take more, bigger, enrich itself, get better, bigger and stronger. And in fact, that contradicts his basic policy, which is actually to draw in from the periphery and not to make the periphery the center, and what the purpose of that is. So he says, look, I'm going to take Canada, and I'm going to take Greenland, and we're going to be stronger, and American, and richer. But actually, when you listen to it, and what people are saying, if you listen to the Marco Rubio's interview with Megyn Kelly, which was a long interview, when did he mention Ukraine? About, minute 75. It was, of course, China, and things like that. But that was almost forgotten. And in many ways, what I think you're seeing, I won't say this about the Israeli aspect of it, but what you're seeing in much of it is sort of making, Ukraine, is that important to America? I mean, why is that, why should we care whether they speak Russian or what in Odessa? I mean, is that a national interest of ours? Is it a national interest whether this, this part is here or there? No, I mean, and now we want money, which again, I mean, he's not serious. He knows that all the rare earth and all those things are in the Donbass and Lunyansk area, and they're already in Russian hands. And he knows that the agricultural part of Ukraine is in the hands of American companies. Already, 80 to 90% of it is mortgaged by American companies. Zelensky has mortgaged it all, so there's nothing really. But it sounds good if he wants to, move on from Ukraine and move inwards, and he wants to get away from it. It sounds really good. He says, they haven't got enough money. We're down 100 billion on this exercise, and they won't pay up. So let them stew. We don't care. And I think, I can't say that is, I know that's the strategy, but this fits very much with his strategy. Now, with Israel, it's more complicated because this is the deepest structure of the deep state. It's a load-bearing structure that has been there, which one has never been able to discuss publicly. If there have been two presidential candidates, this is never discussed. It is the uni-party position in this, and now it is in contestation, and Trump has to manage this with a very powerful Israeli Jewish lobby in America. And how to do this? Well, he takes on all these rather lightweight, but Israel firsters. But then he puts in different people in the number two position, like the number two position in the Defense Department, who says something quite different about Israel and says, and actually you had that hinted by Trump himself, because he was talking about the ceasefire at one point, and he said, well, that's their war. This is the first time you get, one of a president implying that the interests of Israel are not the same as the United States, and that the United States' interests might be different, and that's their war, not our war. And he actually, and in an aside, said that. It's quite important, that sort of little aside. You read Trump by reading all these asides and these contradictions, and it's a lot of guesswork too, because we don't know. But that's why one's trying to put it together. So don't dismiss that it's nonsense, Greenland. He's finding the right way to do what I call moving the periphery into the inside. He's recolonizing the colonized. Europe, Canada, Greenland. Well, that's better than him going out and recolonizing somewhere quite different.
So he's retreating on the one hand, but recolonizing.
Exactly. And that makes, but America's going to come out of this stronger and better and richer as a result of this. We're going to have all of Greenland. Whoa, there's rare earth in Ukraine. We're going to have Greenland, much better. They've got all the rare earths too, rare metals in there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the United States is retreating. And if Trump is going to retreat and save face, the best way to do it is to show the United States is strong. So Greenland, Panama, Canada, all of these make sense. All of these are colonies of the United States in a sense, but he's strengthening the hand of the United States on the one hand, but also he's making any potential retreat from Ukraine look unimportant, because people are looking at the shiny object in Greenland. They're looking at the shiny object in Canada. But I also, as I agree with Alistair, that in Gaza, I don't see, I could be wrong, because as he rightly puts it, this is guesswork, but he may be just talking nonsense. But I do think that we have to keep in mind that he doesn't have the greatest of relationships with Netanyahu, first of all. Netanyahu, when they murdered General Soleimani, when General Soleimani was martyred, he pulled out at the last moment. And then as soon as Biden was announced to be the president in an election which Trump never accepted the results, Netanyahu immediately removed his picture with Trump from his X account or his Twitter account, and that angered him very much, and he used a word that you can't use here. But so that's one thing. Then the second thing is, as Alistair points out, the deep state in the United States, and especially the Zionist lobby or AIPAC and its affiliates and its allies, they're a very powerful force. And Trump does, I don't believe, again, this is all guesswork, but Trump does not want a war with Iran, and he wants to end the war somehow in Ukraine. Now, he may not know how to do it, or he may be incompetent or incapable of ending the war in Ukraine on terms that are acceptable to Russia. But he definitely doesn't not want a war with Iran, because it will ruin his presidency permanently. So the way I see it is that he's trying to satisfy Netanyahu, and of course those who are behind Netanyahu, because Netanyahu on his own is not important. It's the people behind him are important. So he's saying, look, we're going to take this piece of land, and we're going to make it the Riviera of the Mediterranean. But I don't see that as happening. That doesn't mean that he's not going to give real concessions to Netanyahu. That doesn't mean he's going to give those bunker busters which slaughtered so many people. I mean, it's ironic that he speaks about how people in Gaza are living, they're dying. Well, your government is the one that's killing them. And then again, we're seeing what we're seeing now in the West Bank, the colonization and the brutality. The scenes that we now see in Jenin and elsewhere remind us of what was going on in Gaza just a few weeks ago. So it's not as if, in my opinion, that he's not giving concessions, but he is, I think, saying things which create, it makes AIPAC and those, the pro-Israeli lobby, less demanding of him and gives him more space so that he can do some of the things that he wants to do. At least that's how I see it.
So let's dig a little bit deeper into the potential concessions, because you mentioned the West Bank. The other interesting thing that Trump said during his press conference, which got less attention, obviously, because it did have to do with genocide, ethnic cleansing, and luxury resorts on the ruins of Gaza. He said that in 4 weeks' time, he plans on making a major announcement about a change in U.S. policy regarding the West Bank. Now, many people took this as a signal that the U.S. was preparing to greenlight Israeli annexation of the West Bank, because one of the first things that Trump did after returning to office is remove the sanctions on some of the West Bank settlers that Biden imposed. And we know that one of Trump's biggest donors is Miriam Adelson, a prominent businesswoman who supports the West Bank settlement movement. So do you think that Trump may be sort of hyping up Gaza in order to set the stage for more aggressive actions in the West Bank?
It's quite possible. I obviously don't know what the announcement will be, but I do think that Trump is definitely going to give concessions, because the Israeli lobby is very powerful in the United States. The difference, I think, between Trump and the previous administration is that because of the circumstances in the United States, Trump is a very powerful figure right now. Trump in 2016 was not the powerful figure that he is today, because they've tried to destroy him. They thought they had destroyed him. Even a few months ago, they thought that they had destroyed him. No one really thought, well, many people didn't think he would win the election just a year ago. But this time around, not only did he win the election, he got the majority. He destroyed the Democratic Party. So he's in a very commanding position, and that gives him leverage. But that doesn't make him the ultimate ruler. He has powerful forces behind him, as you've pointed out. So I do not think that the situation is going to get any better for the Palestinian people. I think it's going to continue to get worse. I think that it's quite possible that there will be partial annexation, and that's something that Russians have spoken about. They've spoken about having information that there may be some sort of partial annexation. There may be full annexation. We don't know. But again, I'm guessing, I don't think that he will be able to, and I don't think he is seriously contemplating emptying Gaza, but he's saying that so that he could have some space, but he will be giving other concessions, I have no doubt.
Why won't he be able to, sorry?
Well, because over the past 16 months, not only has the resistance in Gaza, with the help of Hezbollah and with the help of Ansarullah and the axis of resistance, not only have Hamas and Islamic Jihad and the others been able to hold their ground and win, despite all the devastation and the genocide, militarily and politically, even though the war may start again, who knows. But I think the world has also turned against the Israeli regime. And the world has become sympathetic to the Palestinian people. A year and a half ago, and I think Alistair and I have been following this for many years, and I think he would agree with me, that a year and a half ago, not even 16, 17 months ago, even after October the 7th, most people across the world had no idea what really was going on in Palestine. They thought this was just some fight over land. And then as the genocide continued and the bloodbath, it got worse and worse, people began to learn about the Nakba and about the history and how the Palestinians were expelled. And they saw that the Israelis were going on killing day and night. And so the world became sympathetic to Palestine. And even in the United States, you have people like Tucker Carlson saying things that have never been said before. You have people like Candace Owens who've turned against Israel. These are people on the right. So I think Trump recognizes that we're living in a different world and that you cannot do just anything that you want. So the Palestinians are entrenched in Gaza. World public opinion has shifted completely away from the Israeli regime. And while it's not impossible that Trump would do such a thing, it would be very costly. And his supporters, many would be saying, we're supposed to be American first. And what, you're going to go and invade Gaza? I just don't see it happening. But again, I don't know the future, and I don't know what's going on in Trump's mind. But I think Trump is buying time and giving and pretending to give a concession here, even though things will be bad for Gaza. Obviously, he's not planning on implementing the third phase of the agreement. And this, by the way, is also going to be costly for the United States, because the United States is constantly failing on abiding by its commitments. The nuclear deal that they had with Iran, Obama failed to abide by it. Then Trump tore up the deal. Then the Minsk Accords, they never took it seriously. We know now from Merkel and Hollande that they were never planning on implementing it. And now the ceasefire, which Trump supported, the ceasefire happened the night before he became president. Now he's saying that there's the third phase of the deal is nonsense. Well, in future, let's say the Iranians or the Russians want to negotiate with the Americans about peace in Ukraine or about the nuclear program, who's going to trust Trump? Because if he's not going to accept his own commitments, then how can Iran or Russia trust them? So, but in any case, I think that in Gaza, although it's going to be tough for the Palestinians, I can't see him attempting seriously to push Palestinians out of that land.
I think you have to try and work out who's trapped whom in this process. It looks very much to the outside as if Netanyahu has carefully put Trump in the corner. But I think there are many in Israel, because I've been looking at the comments that are coming out, that see it very differently. They know that, the right in Israel are sort of laughing at this, and they say, doesn't Netanyahu, who's beaming all over his face after this, doesn't he realize that Trump hates him and despises him and knows how to play him? And yet Trump gave him this big gift. An Israeli minister said beforehand that when Trump first launched this idea of Jordan and Egypt taking Palestinians, who was on Air Force One in a press conference, that apparently had been coordinated with Netanyahu. And he did this, and they started it, and he's now developed it. Why was this? Because Netanyahu's in dire trouble at home. He's in a real fix, because the hostage deal, Gaza hostage deal, is quite clear that at the end of the second phase, it's the end of the war. And there's a withdrawal of Israeli forces, and it's the end of the war. That'll come finally in 42 days, but at 16, it's supposed to be the start of that second process. And at the same time, Netanyahu is given an undertaking to the right to do the opposite, to go back to war. And not to end the war, but to go back to the war. And it's in the annex to some of the a codicil to the cabinet meeting that lasted for 6 hours after there was the final agreement to the deal. So on one hand, Witkoff has one paper, and he says, look, this is your deal, do it, implement it, Netanyahu. And at the same time, Netanyahu is given an undertaking to the right that he's going to do the opposite, that he's actually going to go back, that there won't be a second phase. It'll end before that. There won't be any more hostages coming out after these days now, because he's going to complain that Hamas has broached the agreement, and there won't be a second phase. And his government will fall. And I think Trump, being the sort of transactional man that he is, recognizes this. And he says to himself, I have Netanyahu just where I want him on this, because, he's entirely dependent on me. We've got to get the second phase through. Netanyahu doesn't want a second phase because it's going to be a disaster anyway, and it's going to be, and it'll bring down his government. And so that is a real pressure point on it. And it seems Trump's main interest is to get the hostages out. Actually, Miriam Adelson, is all decked out in yellow. She's not so interested in the West Bank these days. She's focused on the issue of the hostages, as are some of the other donors. So, it's not that clear. And also remember, in his first period, his first term in office, also Trump said, we'll annex the West Bank. What happened? Nothing. And, what's going to happen now? We have no idea. But I think Trump is going to put the nose of the Israelis down to the ground and say, you do this, you release the hostages, all of the hostages, and Netanyahu is going to say, but please, what's going to happen to my government? And then there's going to be a perfect storm in Israel as a consequence of this. Israelis they were shocked by those images coming out, seeing the hostages come out in good health, smiling and waving. It had a huge psychological impact in Israel. And they were healthy and in good shape. And I don't think it's possible for him now to say, no, sorry, Hamas they've changed the rules, we're not going to do a deal, no more hostages. But that's what he needs to keep his government. And if he fails, I think it's probably quite useful for Trump to keep Netanyahu in a position of absolute dependency. Whether he'll do this, some point later he'll say, oh, I don't think it's really possible to do this, move the Palestinians to Gaza or to, I don't know. He may do it, but I think, he keeps this to himself, plays his cards very carefully. And we have to understand it as not only is he playing to the deep state in America, but he is quite knowledgeable on Israeli politics. And it's a complex politics. And it may blow up at any point, the internal politics of Israel. And he understands that. And so that's a part that's almost invisible in the West. They're not, looking and saying, is he doing this with an eye also on future? And the other thing that came out of it, because before the talks, the Israeli right was saying, oh, it's already agreed that Netanyahu will come to Trump and he'll say, look, rather than do phase 2, why don't we do Iran? Attack Iran. And then Saudi Arabia will be easy after that. If Iran is damaged, destroyed, Saudi Arabia will be easier. And then we can do phase 2 of the talks. That was many people said, was likely to be the plan at the meeting with Netanyahu. And it gives an idea of just how trapped Netanyahu is in this process that he's involved with. And I think that means, what is Trump saying? Well, he's already said, no war on Iran. I want to do a deal there. And they've repeated that. Senior people have said this in this last meeting. We're not going to attack Iran. We'll do a deal. And at the same time, I think he's maneuvering. Now, may fail. Maybe he's overextending himself. Maybe he's creating so many, countercurrents that it'll not be possible to do anything he's doing. But I'm not sure he really believes that he can, change the demography of the Middle East in this way. Does he really believe it or not? No one knows. And that's probably one of his cards that he likes to play, that no one knows whether he means it or he doesn't mean it. Like when he says, and everyone else is going to have to pay for it. No, I'm not going to build in Gaza. The Riviera, someone else is going to have to build it. We'll do it, but someone else pays.
I don't want to underestimate or downplay the shamelessness of Trump and speaking about ethnic cleansing as if this is just, it's fine. What he said is absolutely disgusting and unacceptable, and it shows that he is utterly immoral. And it should be condemned, and there should be resistance, and we should make the resistance and the axis of resistance, and all those who are supporting the Palestinian people should use this as an opportunity to attack the United States, its politics, and the Israeli regime. That aside, and there's no doubt that, in my opinion, that Trump has given concessions to the lobby, whether it's with weapons and bunker busters or further annexation in the West Bank. Some other sinister policies will be pursued as a result. But I think that the point that Alistair is making is very important, and that is that there are two things that they wanted from Trump. One is an attack on Iran, which I'm sure that Trump finds impossible because it would destroy the global economy. It would destroy his presidency. If he attacks, then all those glass palaces and castles in the Persian Gulf, these oil and gas-rich regimes, they'll all fall apart. The oil market, the oil prices and gas prices will go through the roof, and the global economy will collapse. And Trump will have to be answerable for that. So he doesn't want that. I'm pretty sure. And the other is, as Alistair pointed out, right now, Netanyahu is stuck. The first phase has ended. He's going into the second phase. He promised not to implement the second phase, to go back to war. So either we have war now, or we have the second phase implemented. So what has Trump done? He says, okay, we're going to empty, again, this is just my guess. We're going to empty this land. That gives Netanyahu consent. The third phase, we're not going to implement. To me, it sounds like he's saying, go on with the second phase. We don't want war. I don't need war right now. So he's going to give him concessions, I think, elsewhere. And I think if I'm understanding Alistair correctly, I think that's also what Alistair is saying. So I think to a degree what he's doing is he's facilitating the implementation of the second phase because it's in Trump's interest. And he's giving Netanyahu this credibility in Israel, among these Zionist politicians who are in his coalition, saying, well, look, we're not going to go back to war, but we're going to empty Gaza of the Palestinians, and we're going to, get other concessions as well. That does make sense. It may be the interpretation may be wrong, because I have no idea what's going on in his mind. But this interpretation does make sense, while stressing the fact that the statements made by Trump last night are utterly shameless and void of morality. But I think it does make sense.
It's, we're going to see. And Pepe, who is sitting over there, formulates is the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's what I think we're going to get. What is the good? I think the good is that actually the America is trying to change completely its orientation to the world. It's said, and Rubio in his confirmation hearing said, the unipolar world is over. In fact, he said, the unipolar world has now turned to be damaging to us. It is hostile to us. It's causing us losses. And he said, the next world order is going to be composed of a number of maxi powers, a concert of Europe, almost like the 19th century. And he said, that's where we're going. I mean, it's a huge shift of orientation of the United States in a different direction. That's quite important. And the sense of drawing back from the periphery. I compare it to Rome. Imperial Rome at some stages had to sort of give up on their furthest provinces when it became too costly and sort of draw back into the center. And I think he's trying to do this and to make it palatable. Greenland, Canada, Panama, all this is making it palatable to Americans, because it's a huge shock for Americans to sort of think, and this is why there's so much opposition from the deep state. You're going to become isolationists. And to which the retort is, no, we're becoming Republicans and not imperial. And so there is this deep, deep struggle. And so much depends on whether he can win I'm not a Trumpist, but I mean, he's got to win the internal war against the deep state. And I'm happy to see the deep state fall apart, of course. So, but the bad, there will be things that, one that won't be pleasant in foreign policy. But I don't think that extends to Ukraine, and I don't think it extends to Russia. Quite clear that in what Trump has been saying in many ways is, he doesn't want to deal with Ukraine per se. He wants to cut the big deal, the grand deal with Russia and Putin. Not Ukraine, nuclear weapons, missiles, spheres of influence. What is the American sphere of influence? It's the Western Hemisphere now. I mean, both he and the vice president often say, Americans are from the Western Hemisphere. We don't live in Asia or Europe. We are in the Western Hemisphere. I think we're going to see spheres of influence, China, Russia, America, and therefore there needs to be some understandings about those spheres of interest, what they consist of, what their boundaries are, where they will lie, what it means in terms of weapons. And, if he does that in the end, and I've tried to say this several times, if he moves to the big picture from the micro picture of Ukraine, goes big picture and says, look, no, I'm here to solve all these things. And Putin said in one of his speeches very clearly, and he said it, look, I can't understand why America got rid of the intermediate range missile treaty in 2019. Well, it was Trump that did that. And Putin is saying, if they're sensible, Trump will come and say, look, President Putin, I was really interested. The other day in that talk you mentioned about the intermediate missile treaty. What did you mean by that? What are you thinking of? What is your idea about this? And then, go that. And leave Ukraine as a sort of tail-end discussion if you need to go that far. But then you go back to America and say, I just saved us from World War III. I've agreed to limit missiles with Russia in Europe. So it's all over. Europe's safe now, and I've made peace, and we've done it. And it would make a great deal of sense for him to approach it that way. And I think Russia would be actually open, and it may even be thinking of doing it in that way.
Just three things, really. One is that the United States needs to retreat because it is overextended. I don't believe that Trump will succeed because Ukraine or even West Asia is only a small part of the problem. The United States has 800, 850 military bases across. So it is overextended by far. And I don't think someone like Trump has the will or the power to correct that. And I think the U.S. decline this is going to be a burden that will continue to pull down the United States further. But I do think that this retreat is interesting. What I think is a retreat when in Iceland and Canada and Panama and all that. And by the way, I don't think that bodes well at all for Brazil. I think that Brazil is going to be in deep trouble because the United States, if it's going to try to take the Americas. I mean, Venezuela, Brazil is going to be tough. Maybe Venezuela is in a somewhat unique situation for the short term or for now. But Brazil, I think that I don't think it's going to be an effective part of BRICS in future because I think the Americans are going to target Brazil. But in any case, the United States has an ideology that is unique, and that is American exceptionalism. They see themselves as above and beyond the rest of the world. They're an exceptional country. They have special privileges. They are touched. And so these elites in Washington and the deep state and many ordinary Americans are deeply entrenched in this ideology. So retreat doesn't make sense for them because, America is great and they can do anything, they will overcome. And so if anyone, whether it's Trump or anyone else, wants to retreat, the only way to do it is to make this look like an attack, make it look like a victory. So if you're retreating from, let's say, Ukraine, if you're going to retreat from other areas, if you're going to compromise here and there, the best thing to do is have people focus on that Iceland that's going to be the future, or Canada, or how we're making America great again by kicking out the Chinese from Panama when they really weren't there in the first place. So it does make sense. But again, I think that the United States is overextended. I think the debt is too great. I think the problems that the United States has is far beyond anything that Trump can resolve. And again, I stress that Trump's intentions towards the Palestinian people are not benign. He has the very fact that he's giving bunker busters to the Israeli regime is so that they can slaughter more innocent people. And I think that says everything that we need to know about Trump. But that doesn't make him any worse than Biden or the others before him. Remember, Obama was the person who greenlighted the genocide in Yemen. He was the person who destroyed Libya. He's the person who started the dirty war in Syria. And who would have thought that in the Senate, someone like Tulsi Gabbard would one day expose all of these things to the public? So he's just following a tradition of American presidents of being completely amoral and willing to do anything. But it does seem that there are reasons behind certain statements and certain things that Trump says.
Behind it is necessity. Really, the financial, the economic situation is becoming rapidly existential. They have to cut expenses. The budget deficit is just gone up enormously in this period. Biden has been spending like we say, a drunken sailor, and all over, and it's huge, and it's got to be, and it's understood that it's unsustainable. This is why we have Musk going around stopping all of these excesses and getting rid of changing the State Department and moving the overseas development funds back into State Department and cutting them. It's it's part of this process. It also fits with coming, withdrawing back, towards the center. But I think the most important thing that's going on, which, as I say, is not only the reorientation of the face of the United States away from being hegemonic, but to being a big multipolar power with a Western Hemisphere sphere of influence, but also the unmasking. I mean, so many things are being exposed now, part of the strategy. Whether it's Tucker Carlson or Musk or someone else or Joe Rogan, things are being exposed that were never supposed to be exposed to the public. And there's a sort of sense also of this last period has been one of a competency crisis, that things were just not being well managed by government, by the bureaucracy. We saw that in California. We've seen it in other places where there was no water in the reservoirs. The hydrants didn't turn on. Half of the fire force had been decimated. The other parts were undergoing a sort of DEI, a reorientation of the gender balance amongst the firefighters. And in the end, I mean, the predictability, this Santa Ana wind comes every year. And people have been saying, it's a disaster waiting to happen. And when it happened, they'd forgotten to put any water in the reservoirs. They were dry. I mean, that sort of incompetency is just not acceptable to the public. I mean, we have it in Europe too, as much as there. So there is a fair feeling, which I think he's, using and traveling, that, as these things become revealed more, as, all of this is uncovered and unmasked in the Treasury, in the finance world, in the FBI, more is coming for sure. There's going to be quite a strong reaction, and this is what I think he's counting on, is to sort of carry him through the sort of big task of trying to reform and change, not the world, but the United States of America itself, because he's trying to do a structural change inside the United States at a most difficult time, when the financial world, the financial situation is not favorable for doing structural changes. He's having to sort of claw back resources and everything. It's hard to move away from sort of low interest rates, a financialized economy, to a tariff-type economy. It takes a change. It's not stupid, but it's not easy to do. And as I said, and I repeat what I said, he may overreach, he may make a mistake, he may get this disastrously wrong, in which case we'll all feel the consequences. Certainly us in Europe will feel the consequences. If that does go badly wrong, Europe will be in a disastrous situation.
I must admit that I am optimistic that the United States, these deep divisions in the United States, alongside this, the fact that it's overextended, are the reasons why the United States empire, the empire of the United States, will ultimately collapse. The divisions in the United States are enormous, and the economic problems that the United States faces today, I think, are extraordinary. And Trump's economic policies, as Alistair was alluding to, may be good for reindustrialization, but I think the United States has gone way beyond the point where you can bring back industrialization. It will take decades. So I'm optimistic. I think we have dark days ahead. I think we have dark months and maybe a lot of darkness ahead of us. But I'm optimistic that the U.S. empire will not last, and even hopefully Latin America will do well. So that our good friend Pepe Escobar, because there's only one Pepe, because Alistair and I both mentioned him, but there's only one Pepe Escobar. So we're assuming that your audience knows who we're talking about.
Yeah, of course.
So maybe later on he can speak about Latin America in particular, but we're hoping that Latin America hangs in there.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you too so much, because we initially promised our viewers to do a deep dive on the Middle East, but we outperformed, we did a deep dive on American internal politics, on Israeli politics, and sort of American grand strategy in the era of Trump. So I want to thank you both for such lucid, fascinating analysis. And to all our viewers, thank you for watching. Please like this video, please repost it to share the wisdom around. And I also want to take this opportunity to once again thank the Valdi Club and our good friend Pepe Escobar for making this interview happen. Thank you all for tuning in. Till next time.